Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. And today we're patching a hole. I was thoroughly convinced I had already reviewed The Darkening of Mirkwood, and it has been pointed out to me that I have not. So let's talk about The Darkening of Mirkwood. This is the primary campaign supplement, campaign book for the One Ring RPG, and they just kickstarted a second edition of the One Ring, and so I know that they're working on a lot of new upcoming stuff, and one of those things might be a new campaign. But everything they've promised for that is backwards compatible with the old edition and with the old supplements, which makes this still a really phenomenal book, regardless of which edition you're going to have. This takes place in Mirkwood, as the title would suggest, and it is important to point off right off the bat that the title is The Darkening of Mirkwood. It is not The Cleansing of Mirkwood. It is not that one time we all went out and made Mirkwood wonderful. This is a tragedy, and it is a very unique play experience because of that. This book takes place in between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and picks up, in fact, 5 years after the Hobbit ends, the Battle of Five Armies. During that time, what they call Wilderland, the area in and around Mirkwood, has become pretty nice. Over on the west, in the Anduin Vales, the Bjornings and the Woodmen have really started, kind of populating things. There are settlements springing up all over the place. They are more open to trade and to outsiders. In fact, I don't think the Bjornings as a group even really existed prior to The Hobbit. There was just Bjorn. And in the time since the Battle of Five Armies, he's been collecting, followers. He's been teaching people how to live on the land. They're kind of a mountain man kind of thing, which is very different from the Woodmen, who are more concerned. They're not as nature oriented. They're trying to carve a living out of the wilderness rather than live in harmony with it. Over on the eastern side of Mirkwood, you of course have the major change, which is that Erebor is once again, the Lonely Mountain is once again full of dwarves. And so you've got King Dane there, and then in the shadows of the mountain, Esgaroth is back. Dale is back. Lake Town, of course, is still there and is even larger than before. And now the town of Dale itself, which is a little further up that river, is thriving. And so there's a ton of commerce going on. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of people flooding in, human dwarf from all over the place. Even the elves, King Thranduil in Mirkwood, he is, he's never been not a dick, really, but he's nicer now. And he's willing to trade with some of these other groups, and he's willing to do a lot more. Even in The Hobbit, there's hints of trade as they are moving wine barrels up and down that river. But now, that's just turned into a full-fledged kind of economic partnership. And it's a really nice, wonderful place to live all around. But we know that in about 45 years, the Lord of the Rings is going to happen. And so this is what's happening in between. And I love the tone of the game because it starts in this position of such wonderfulness and then shows bit by bit as the shadow starts to rise again. The ring has come out of the Misty Mountains, and Sauron knows it's there, and so he's sent people to look for it. And you could play the entire campaign without ever dealing with the ring or with Sauron directly or anything like that. But what you do have are all of his servants. There are ring wraiths out. There are ghosts. There are orcs. The White Council has thrown the necromancer out of Dol Guldur in the south of Mirkwood, but it's still nasty. It's still full of his presence. And there are all kinds of creatures both natural and unnatural, that are kind of just coming out of the woodwork and creeping out and moving into the power vacuum or relying on the growing power of Sauron in the south. And so you play over this campaign, and you know from the beginning it's not going to end well for you. And it's not so much about winning as about overthrowing a Dark Lord. It's more about what are we going to do to form valuable connections and find joy even as the shadow is rising. And that is such a Tolkien theme for a campaign. It feels so much like Lord of the Rings in a way that a traditional quest would not, because it is very focused thematically on finding companionship, on finding hope, even in the face of this overwhelming darkness. And so it gives a very different feel. Well, let's talk about it a little bit. The structure of the campaign is very open. And I know that it can seem daunting to a lot of game masters. I was certainly daunted by it when I started. The intention is similar to something like Pendragon, where you are playing through a game year by year. And the One Ring is set up for this. You have your adventuring phase, in which you go out and you do a quest or you fight a monster or whatever. And then you have a fellowship phase, in which you have a chance to go back home and, talk to your neighbors. There's fellowship activities you can do of opening up havens. It's all done with a very broad scope in mind, where over the course of, in this campaign, 40 or so years, you are going to be establishing connections with certain patrons like Radagast or Bjorn or Gandalf or even Saruman. You're going to be going through year by year and watching as your character grows and changes, and so the focus is very heavily on building those relationships. But because of the way that it takes so much time, there isn't the typical end goal that you would expect to find in a campaign. You can't jump into this like you would with, say, the Curse of Strahd from D&D and know immediately from your first or second session that your goal is to defeat Strahd. That is not the case here, because you know that you can't just defeat Sauron. So it can be hard then, I think, for a lot of game masters to go through and figure out how to provide focus to the campaign. And so my advice, and this is something I've had to learn over time because I was just as confused as everybody else, is to focus on those relationships. Focus on the people. The combat, the quest, those things are there, but they are less important than kind of the player-driven narrative around the relationships that they're building. Let me show you what I mean. We're going to go into our big PDF here, and I'm going to show you one of the early years. Okay? So, in fact, the very second year of this campaign is the year 2948, and the big main thing that happens is the Folkmoot at Roscabel. Roscabel is, of course, where Radagast lives, kind of in central Mirkwood-ish area. And there are a lot of things going on here. This is mostly just everybody's here, and we get to meet them. We get to meet Ingimar, who's the leader of the Woodmen, and you get to meet Radagast and do all these other things. And the reason that this is so important to come at the beginning is because there's 3 new groups that you have a chance to meet as well. One of them is, I think her name is Amaliota. Do we get to meet her? Amaliota, Shield Maiden of the Black Tarn. The Black Tarn is a lake that is just kind of very near Roscabel, just a little bit off to the south and east. It is along this very gloomy river that I can't remember the name of. It might actually be the Gloomy River that separates the western eaves of Mirkwood from the heart of Mirkwood, which is full of shadow and monsters and is very dangerous. And this river marks the border. And down at the base of this river is the lake itself, called the Black Tarn, because the water is so dark. It is not an inherently evil place, but it is kind of a tricky place to live. It's dangerous because half of the lake is bordered by the heart of Mirkwood. And so Amaliota and a bunch of other woodmen and woodwomen with her have established a new town there. Meanwhile, on the eastern side of Mirkwood, if you go through the narrows of Mirkwood into East Bight, there is a man named, I want to say, Keowin the Generous, right there, who has established a new town over there in the East Bight. And this is where the Northmen used to have a really huge, wonderful town civilization sort of thing several hundred years ago. It's why there is an East Bight. If you look at a map of Mirkwood, it kind of is mostly cylindrical, but on the east side there's this little cutout where you... And that's where the old Northmen kind of logged out this area so heavily that now it's just plains. So Keowin is trying to rebuild this ancient kingdom of woodmen, and he's like, this is a great place, this is the perfect time, all of these wonderful things are happening, the woodmen are on the wrong side of Mirkwood, they're separated from all of the action and energy and motion in Erebor, Dale, Laketown, Thranduil's Hall, Dorwinion, all of these other wonderful places that we have access to. So you should come over here and help us build this new town and this new kingdom. Meanwhile, the third person is down. That's a good picture of him right there. His name is Mogdred. And Mogdred is building a town. I don't have a good picture. I don't have a good map to show off. Mogdred is building a new town in what's called Tyrant's Hill, which is even further south than the Black Tarn is, and it is near-ish to Dol Guldur. And he is saying, look, the White Council kicked out the Necromancer, all his servants are gone, everybody's gone. We've got all of these kind of fortifications there that are no longer being used by the orcs and the evil men that used to control them. I've taken one. It's called the Tyrant's Hill. And I am building this wonderful new, outpost of woodmen. And I would really appreciate it if everybody helped me out. And so the players then, right from the beginning, have a chance to decide, are you really, do you believe Mogdred about the Tyrant's Hill and what he is building? Do you want to welcome him into the woodman community, or do you want to try to drive him away? Do you trust what he's doing, or do you think he has ulterior motives? The same with Keowin. The same with Amaliota. All three of these groups are opportunities for the players to decide for themselves who they want to trust and what kind of a future they want to build. That can make the campaign difficult for a game master to predict, because you don't know. Maybe your players are just all aboard with Mogdred, and that they are going to do what they can to help him to build up relationships and do good things. What the campaign does include are several things throughout the rest of this whole arc of time where, it will say, this event happens, event X happens, and then if the player characters have welcomed Mogdred into the woodman community, he will react in one way. If he is not welcome and is considered separate from the others, he will react in a different way. Maybe he will start causing trouble, or maybe he will be a kind of bastion of safety in that dangerous part of the wood. Same with Keowin, same with Amaliota. It really is a nice way of letting the players drive that part of the narrative. And so all the events that happen, all the things that happen, let's show a little example here. We've got So the questing beasts, for example, this is one that happens in 2949, but it can recur. It's just the white deer has been spotted in northern Mirkwood, and Thranduil's like, we're going to have a big party hunt thing to find it, and whoever finds it wins. There isn't really a prize. And so that's a thing that happens. That is an event that can take place if the characters are interested in it. But the more important thing is, what are they trying to build? What are they trying to do? What kind of a world and a community are they trying to create? What relationships have they built? And in some ways, it can feel kind of delightfully, deliciously cruel as a game master to go through and watch as the characters establish these really strong friendships with all of these NPCs. How they will get invested in something like the East Bite, and they will really try to build it up because it's full of good people who are trying to do a good thing. But then year by year, it just gets worse. And you're kind of fighting against the tide of history, knowing that Sauron's forces will continue to rise, knowing that at some point all of the free peoples will depend on, a giant war taking place in the south that we're not even necessarily a part of. It can be a very dark experience, but what it does do is it creates those moments where you've spent so much time in East Bite and you've gotten to know those characters well. And then as they start to fall apart, you have the chance to, share in their pain, or to try to evacuate them, to try to, find those moments of joy and hope in the middle of the darkness. Like I said, it's really very sandboxy. It gives people a lot of chances to make their own choices, to decide what they want to do and how they want to do it. And it does, like I said, capture a lot of really great Tolkien vibes in the way that it is focused more so on hope and fellowship than it is on monster slaying. That said, it does have plenty of monster slaying as well. There's some pretty fantastic battles. The way that I am running this right now in the One Ring campaign that I'm running, I have combined the Darkening of Mirkwood with the Tales from Wilderland supplement that offers, I think, 7 adventures. I've reviewed that before. And kind of fit those in as necessary. And then I'm also using the treasure rules from Rivendell just to provide some extra treasure. I'm also going to be using eventually the I can't remember what they're called exactly, but the Eye of Sauron rules. That the greater of a hero you are, the more you do to make the world a better place, the more Sauron is aware of you, and therefore will start to kind of work against you in subtle ways. So combining lots of different supplements can make this into an even richer experience. But the book as a whole by itself is already great. Definitely don't run the Darkening of Mirkwood without the Heart of the Wild book, which is the setting book that describes Mirkwood and who all of these people are and how they all relate to each other. Because you do need, I think, a pretty good grounding in who those NPCs are so that as your characters wander around, they can get to know everyone. But if you've got the core book, you've got Heart of the Wild, grab Darkening of Mirkwood. It is a really great, flavorful, fun, player-driven campaign that captures the mood and the tone and the voice of Tolkien really well. So, 2 huge thumbs up for the Darkening of Mirkwood. Anyway, let me do some quick promo here at the end. I am, as I say every week, I am a professional author. I've got 19 books published. My most recent is called Stargazer. It's an Audible original, middle grade hard science fiction. I have middle grade, I have young adult, I have adult, I have science fiction, I have horror. I've got everything. So depending on what you like, click the links below and find a bunch of books that will delight you and also pay for my children to eat. I am on top of that a professional game master. I actually have a really full slate at the moment. I had to even cancel a couple of games last week because I have too many going. But, I waited until we got to the end of a campaign arc in order to cancel them. But there are always, here and there, slots opening up, and I, of course, do one-shots. If you're interested in something like that for a party or a group of friends or whatever, let me know. If you want to do a campaign or a one-shot, I can run those for you, including the One Ring and the Darkening of Mirkwood. I actually am actively hoping to put together a second One Ring game right now because I've got a player that I was running through Dresden Files, and now he wants to play the One Ring. So, there you go. Anyway, thanks for watching. This is a joy for me to do these videos. I hope that you enjoy them as well. My name is Dan Wells, and you are awesome.